There's been a lot of confusion about how the new Nuro wallet actually works, and I thought that just for now I will do a quick sketch of how it works, and then later on we're going to do a more professional video for normal guidance. So there are several components that consist of our wallet solution. There's block cipher, a block explorer, and then we have phone. Okay. And then finally we've got the user. And just to clarify, because everyone's worried about where the keys are stored, we're going to separate the phone into two other elements. So the phone consists of the RAM and the flash, which is basically otherwise known as storage. So that the only way you can have anything that is kept in the phone between launches of a program or between power cycles is if you store it in the flash storage of the phone. Now I just want to let everybody know that to begin with, Nuro does not use this. We do not use the flash storage. Nuro does not store anything on your phone which doesn't disappear when you close the program or when you restart your phone. So there are no keys stored physically on the phone for anyone to take. So then you ask, how do we get the key? How do we do anything? So okay, here we go. So we got the user. The user supplies the username, the password, and the PIN. And what Nuro does is Nuro gets these three things and combines them, and it gets hashed, and that becomes the private key. And this is often known as a brain wallet. Because really what's happening is the key is being made by your brain, by what you know. So it is very important, and this is stated on the login page, that you choose something that somebody else cannot guess. Now what happens is this private key goes into RAM here. Okay? And again, this is it's also what we call protected memory, an isolated memory space. So every app has got its own memory in the RAM. It's like you can think of it as like a block. There's a block of memory for Nuro, and no other application can touch that. So other programs can't read your key unless your phone has been jailbroken or rooted. In which case, what you're doing is you're telling the phone, "Let me do whatever I want, including breaking the security of the phone." So this is why I've repeatedly told people not to use a jailbroken or a rooted device for any type of financial application, because anything could happen. You know, once you jailbreak or root your phone, it can be subject to viruses and whatever other problems. Now, so what happens now? We've got the private key, and the other thing is there's a relationship between the private key and the public key and the public address. So what happens is from the private key we make, and you know, this is all part of the cryptographic system that was originally created in Bitcoin. So we create a public key from the private key. So every single private key has one and only one public key that matches it, and there's an algorithm to make that public key. And from that, it goes through some encoding, and the encoding is actually called base 58. But there's no need for you to know how it's done. But all that matters is you get a public address at the end. Public address. And this is what you send to other people to receive money. And this is how all crypto coins actually work at the moment. Now, so what happens is when you've logged in by typing your username, password, and PIN, the private key is generated. It gets stored in the RAM of the Nuro app in its own isolated memory space that no other program can touch, as long as your phone's not jailbroken or rooted. And then from that, the public key is generated. Again, that's also stored in memory, and that then goes through an encoding to a public address that also gets stored in this special block of memory. And this work is all done by our CoinUtils browser library, which we've made for the benefit of everyone. It's all open source, and that saves a lot of time in getting through these stages. But that's another video. Now, so what happens is Nuro. Yeah, okay, so in the phone we've got Nuro. So, Nuro takes the public address, and what it does is it queries block cipher, which is an API, yeah? API, Application Programming Interface. It just means that you type in a particular thing with the address inside a link, and then block cipher gives you back what's called a JSON. It's like basically like a document with some data that we read and whatever. So, with the public address, we ask for the balance, right? So there's basically a function that gets balance. Okay, and then block cipher returns with the balance. It also returns the pending funds, which are the transactions that haven't been confirmed yet. So that's block cipher. Block cipher does something else, which is that when we want to send money, Nuro requests from block cipher what's called a TX skeleton. And what this is we give block cipher the destination address, you know, who we want to send money to, and we also give them our public address, and block cipher works out the amount of money in the address, and we also ask block cipher we also give block cipher through the skeleton how much we want to send. And what block cipher does is it will go through the blockchain, find all the unspent outputs that you have on the address, you know, which is your funds. Then it builds a transaction in the cloud, which is a lot faster than doing on your phone. And also means you don't need to store this multi-gigabyte, you know, file, the blockchain on your phone, which is ridiculous. And even if you don't want to do that, you know, you don't need to store what they call the SPV headers, which in itself it still takes a bit of memory, and it takes a lot of time. So block cipher does all that work for us, and it returns an unsigned transaction. Okay. And then here's where the magic happens. So Nuro uses an ECDSA library, Ecliptic Curve Digital Signature Algorithm library, which uses your private key, and signs the transaction. Remember, this is all done in the phone, in memory, not in block cipher. Block cipher never ever sees your key. Okay, so the private key from memory is used to sign this transaction, which is unsigned. And then when it's got the signed transaction, that gets sent back to block cipher, and voila, your transaction gets broadcast onto the network, and you see it straight away. And the reason why it's so fast is that block cipher is connected to over 40 nodes in the Euro network, and they're connected in a geographically distributed cloud system. So no matter where you are, your node, your closest node, will get that transaction as quickly as possible, faster than any other technology available at the moment. And finally, we read the transaction from both block cipher and the block explorer. So that's two short sources of information to get your transaction history, which is what we display. So the transaction history, the TX history. And that's how Nuro works. So remember, no key is stored. Every time you log in, we generate the key from your username, password, and PIN. It turns into a private key. So this is also known as a brain wallet, which then we then generate the public key and encode it into the public address. Use that to get the balance from block cipher, and that block cipher goes as the balance and the pending transactions. To send money, we request a TX skeleton from block cipher, which contains our input address, the output address, and how much we want to send. Block cipher returns a properly built transaction that's not been signed yet. We sign it locally on the phone with the CoinUtils library using ecliptic curve signature algorithm. Then we send the signed transaction back to block cipher, who then broadcasts it into the Euro network for us, and that's how you see your transaction very quickly. And when we want to see the transaction history, we can request it from block cipher and block explorer. So now you've got two sources that verify the same information, and that will give us the transaction history, which appears on the table, and these are the confirmed transactions. So that's why we show the pending just in one lot, because it doesn't matter how many pending transactions there are, they don't officially become the status quo until they land on a block. Okay, so that's our first video about how Nuro works. I know it was very messy. We will make a much better one soon.